part 3 of our episode with Mark Stoos. So, how is AI going to affect employment? How's it going to change how we interact? Find out more on this episode. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. Now, as somebody who might be a future employee or looking at, where is the work going to be in the future? Because I agree with you, AI is going to assist in a lot of ways, and it's going to eliminate certain jobs that exist now. But at the same point, that's going to free up other opportunities somewhere else. And where do you see it from an AI perspective? Where do you see, the labor force needing to grow or to adjust?
I think again we can take a lesson from history here, recent history, right? So at the end of World War II, the average fighter aircraft could move at around 450 to 500 miles an hour. It had about 5 to 7 gauges max on the dashboard, and pilots were largely flying by the seat of their pants, right? It was a very pilot-centric, talent-centric idea. And like total closing speed between two combatants, right, would have been roughly 1,000 miles an hour. Then all of a sudden we broke the sound barrier. So we're now Mach, and then very fast, 2 years later, Mach 2, Mach 3, right? So we're now moving at closing speeds in combat, right, with all the swirl and all this kind of stuff as well, right, that are approaching 4 to 5 times the speed of sound. There was not a World War II pilot capable reaction time, right, of making that happen unaided, right? And so you started to see more and more automation. You started to see a lot of stuff in these aircraft that we could kind of call proto AI, right? A lot of decision aids, all this kind of stuff. And it required usually not many World War II era pilots, Korean War era pilots were able to make the transition mentally to this new thing, right? It was almost like a generational shift. Then what we're looking at now, probably within the next, so most experts would say that we are currently at or very near the last generation of combat fighter that's manned, like on board, right? So you're going to see fighter aircraft in the next 20 years that have no human beings on board, that are probably controlled by someone on the ground, not unlike a Predator drone or something like that. But also, you're not going to have one pilot sitting in a console back in Dover, Delaware, right, controlling one aircraft. You're going to have the ability to have one guy controlling a lot of aircraft, right? So there's going to have to be an AI interface to that. So are we going to be training pilots for naval fighter aircraft, U.S. Air Force fighter aircraft, in the same way that we are training them today? Not a chance. So does that mean that the skill set, the need goes away? No, it doesn't. Does that mean it changes substantially? Yeah, it probably does. Does that mean that you don't get personally shot at anymore? Yeah, that's probably a real upside, So I think that we saw this in, to talk about briefly, much more pedestrian kind of topic. I was present for a lot of the data center automation stuff, right? And what we saw there was a whole layer of activity in the data center that was automated. And all of a sudden, people didn't have to do that anymore. And there wasn't actually a lot of layoffs. There was just a big step up in terms of what you got to really work on and higher value stuff, and you're moving faster, doing cooler stuff, all this kind of stuff. And then now what we have is situation 20 years later where a lot of people are graduating with IT degrees that literally have no frame of reference outside of that automation layer. So can they do those skills personally at all if they had to? No. Like there was a great article not too long ago that was interviewing this, like the top IT management graduate from MIT, and they took him into a data center that was about to be powered up for the first time and said, so how do you do this? How do you power it up? How do you where's the go button? Right? Didn't have a flippin' clue. Right? Who had the knowledge? A guy who was 68 years old had that knowledge. So you're now talking about just some really interesting factors, right? That we're going to see. It's going to make it messy. It's going to, I think that actually one of the good things about this is it's going to puncture the whole ageism thing, which is like out of all the prejudices that human beings have, which are all stupid, okay? Ageism is the most stupid, okay? Because it's going to happen to all of us.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
and you're also taking the person with the most experience and
right,
eliminating them.
That's right. And so, so it's just, so I do think that's going to be kind of like a beneficial piece of collateral on this. We already see it right now. I mean, in sales and marketing and a whole bunch of areas in businesses right now, a lot of people have never been through a time like this before. Their whole career is, say, less than 20 years. And in some cases, less than 15. In most cases, less than 15, right? So they literally have no frame of reference. There's a whole bunch of SaaS sales teams that have no idea how to sell SaaS in a radically suboptimal environment. Right? And so this is, we're gonna have to make our way through this. But there's going to be a lot of those kinds of rocks that have to be overturned, and we have to look underneath them, and the bugs are going to be there and all that kind of stuff, and we're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Anytime there's these major shifts, it's going to upend everything.
Yeah, I mean and it won't be fun. But I will say this: I really believe this. And I think there's tons of evidence for this statement. The more T-shaped you are as a professional, as a leader, as a follower, right, the more successful you're going to be. Right. So the T, right, this is your specialization right here. And that's pretty easily measured because it's basically how deep can you go in a conversation about your specialization, or some people have more than one, right? This is all about the context, right? This is about, hey, you know what? Do I have the business acumen, the financial understanding, the marketing understanding, the business understanding, the marketplace understanding to better understand my specialization and other people's and the interaction between them? And a great measure of how T-shaped you are is take your area of specialization. Can you discuss it with the rest of the business team using only business words? So none of your own specialist slang, no marketing terms, no IT terms, nothing. Can you discuss it really fluently and be easily understood, only talking about it in business terms? Likewise, going the other way, can you take a business idea and talk about it with your specialist team members who may or may not be very T-shaped in a way that they understand it, right? Can you essentially analogize, right, in using specialist language and describe what the business problem is? So this nexus, this point of convergence, is really where the action is going to be over the next, say, 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the challenges is that we have, in the last 20 years, we have over rotated on specialist understanding. And so there's not a lot of T-shaped people out there, right? And we also have among the professional business class, okay, we have a lot of people with horizontal understanding and very little appreciation for what it takes to actually operate one of these specializations. You see it in IT, you see it in data science, you see it in marketing, right? There's just like zero empathy, zero understanding for the realities of those areas, right? And so this is gonna be something that's gonna have to be worked out. And again, that's not AI can help with that in terms of crunching perspective. That's really the way that I prefer to look at it. But people are going to make those calls. AI is not going to make those calls.
Do you think a lot of that's tied to the speed of change that we're going through right now? Because I mean, if it's almost like the circuit boards. I forget what the terminology, because I'm not IT, but every year, basically the number of connections doubles, and that's
Yeah.
pretty much become law. It's almost like the world has moved so fast at this point that we don't worry about the depth anymore. We're too worried about the horizontal, as you put it. So there's
Well,
always trying to learn the next thing, but not
yeah.
in depth on that thing.
Unless our whole area is vertical, is a specialization,
That's true.
in which case we over rotate there, right?
Yeah.
This is actually incredibly human. We're now talking about stuff that actually is almost an entirely human dynamic, right? The tech. So let's maybe I'm trying to think of a way to talk about this that's very approachable. So everyone in this audience has probably heard of people process technology, right? It's a triangle, right? And most of the time, you Google it, you're going to see a bunch of infographic illustrations of it. And it's almost always presented as an equilateral triangle. So all the sides are the same, right? The problem is that that's not even close to real, right? It's a profoundly scaling triangle, which means that one leg of the triangle is dramatically longer than the other two, and the other two are different as well, right? From each other. So what is the long pole? What's the long leg of this triangle? It's people. It's not, like one of the most explosive bodies of data, which I guess from one standpoint, I totally understand why they haven't wanted to release this, because it'd just be not fun. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the top analyst firms has 20 to 25 years worth of data on this that shows that when there is a product implementation failure, we're talking about software primarily, the fault is very rarely, meaning like 5% of the time, with the product. It is almost always because of people issues internally, right? Failure of commitment, failure of ability, right? Capability, capacity, all this kind of stuff, right? You're really seeing this, by the way, in spades, which is part of also what's going on in the AI conversation among C-suites, is there's an increasing gap between the power of new SaaS and the ability of teams to extract the value, because they don't have the capability, the capacity, the learning, the whatever, right?
Right.
So this goes to your issue of speed of change. So this is a situation now where a lot of leaders are saying to themselves, number one, I don't want to spend the money to upskill my guys, which personally I think is the wrong position to take, but that's their position, right? And so I just want to replace them, as many of them as possible, with robots, because the robots won't have a lot of those constraints, and they can also work 24/7, 365.
Right.
They need sleep. They don't have spouses that want to go on vacation, all this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So so there will be some of this, right? And we will, over the next 10 years, in environments, work with literal robots and let's call it soft robots, right? Bots. And it will just be real, at some level. But I don't think it's going to be possible to swing the pendulum profoundly anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Rich.
I don't know how cool it is.
Well, in my world, there's always change. You're always, and of course, I'm dealing with people all the time. So I see eventually there's going to be opportunity where, certain issues exist. It's just a matter of who's going to find that opportunity, who's going to capitalize on it. And that's what I'm always looking for is, there's always going to be a need for people. Otherwise, if we're creating technology to eliminate all of us, what good have we done then? Because people need purpose. They need something
that's right.
to give life fulfillment.
And the other thing that's going to really drive this is competition, right? I mean, look, nuclear power was theoretical in the extreme until World War II, until you had Nazis and other fascists bent on global domination and bad stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that accelerated the Manhattan Project was the thought that the Germans might get the bomb first.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so under that kind of scenario, leaders, understandably, if not rightfully, tend to become pretty damn expedient. Right. And so it was, this is, I think, one of the great lessons of Oppenheimer, the movie, right? Is it dramatized it so well. Even among the scientists, it was this theoretical concept right up until the Trinity test at Los Alamos, and everybody kind of went, "Holy shit!" Right? And at that point, you couldn't uninvent, you couldn't undo. Right? It had passed irretrievably from a purely scientific endeavor to one that now was almost purely political in terms of its control. So, I think that is that's going to happen here, right? And the EU, China, California, many other governments are creating regulatory environments around AI that, one of the things we're going to find out is who really has the power. Do governments have the power today, or do corporations have the power today? This actually happens in history with some regularity. Approximately every 150 years, you see this kind of cycle. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what Theodore Roosevelt dealt with when he was president. He had to break the back of a lot of the trusts and things like that in the United States to show who had the supremacy, as well as get rid of a lot of bad behavior and corruption and stuff like that. But we're now in a place where we're kind of, multinationals transcend individual nation authority. So how do you really deal with that? And for a long time, there wasn't really any super compelling factor that was going to kind of drive this to some sort of existential answer. But I think that AI is that for sure. I mean, I just don't see it as being any other answer as being possible.
Hey, thanks for checking out part 3 of Books in the Biz interview with Mark Stoos from Proof Analytics. Be sure to catch up on part 4.